Hi, I'm Sil. I'm creating a D&D tabletop product called Arena Battle League. And even though the final product is a book, I'm using Unreal Engine to do all of the artwork for it. This allows me to make dramatic videos for each picture in the book that DMs can share with their players at the table. In this YouTube series, we'll show you the progress we make as we push toward launch. Welcome to Sil Creates. This week, Chris and I did a fair bit of design work. I've had an idea for a long time, a desire to improve the ease by which DMs can adjudicate the gameplay. The rules can be very complicated, and a dungeon master has a lot of responsibility. They have to keep track of the story, they have to roleplay characters, all the while ensuring that the players are enjoying themselves. It's a heavy burden. Every time a player character attacks an enemy, the enemy may or may not have a reaction that they can do to either interrupt or intercept or somehow change the results of the player's actions. So it can be quite challenging for the DM. And so I had this idea of removing the reactions from the NPC stat blocks, or as many as we can, and instead have their actual actions grant their teammates usage of their reaction. We only have to worry about those reactions when it's the NPC's turn. You may have thought that I had finished with martial law after last week, but the assets that I got had some iconography from the real world. You can see some crosses here, and I want to be respectful of religions in our world, and I don't want to misuse them in our product. So I attempted to edit the models using the Unreal editing tools. And at first I had a lot of trouble because they aren't very intuitive, but eventually I figured out editing of skeletal meshes. One thing I try to do whenever I'm using Unreal Engine is to very carefully document the workflows that I discover and save myself a lot of Googling time. Before I knew how to actually remove polygons, I was doing the next best thing, which was to basically just to obscure those crosses with a medallion that's just sort of plain, which did the trick temporarily. The other area that I had to fix was the texture maps. These characters also had recognizable crosses built into the textures that are on their uniforms. And those are image-based textures that are applied to the polygons of their clothing. And I simply used Photoshop to edit these. There are tools that are designed for texture editing where you can edit the textures right on the 3D object. One of the most popular is called Substance Painter. It allows you to see the edits on the actual surface of the model, where you don't have to worry about the distortion that can appear in these texture maps. These texture maps are something like the surface of a balloon. You can imagine blowing a balloon up and drawing a smiley face on it with a Sharpie, and then letting the air out and spreading that balloon on the table, flattening it to the surface of the table, and you can imagine it won't look much like a smiley face. The work I did here was very much the equivalent of me doing the updates of the flattened balloon and hoping that it would work when the balloon was reinflated. I think it worked out all right. When I showed the team to my niece, she pointed out that Executioner didn't really look like an Executioner. She suggested perhaps an Executioner's hood would go a long way to really make her feel more in theme. I couldn't find a hood that was parametric that would fit metahumans, but I did find one that was workable, that I could edit using the skeletal mesh editing tools in Unreal Engine to stretch the polygons and to move the polygons around to ensure that none of her head is poking through. I then decided I would like to have her hair appear as well. And so I went through the process again after re-enabling her hair so that it would be visible when her hood was on as well. Because I really liked her white hair. My niece also mentioned that the characters looked somewhat like alchemists with their potions and bottles. And with my newfound skill of editing skeletal mesh polygons and removing them, I decided to just take all of those off of all of the models. That was only the outfits of Executioner and Bailiff. Jury and Judge had different models altogether, so I had to go back in and do the same work for each of those models, removing the pots, the potions, and other accoutrements. I then wanted to make sure that each of the members of the team looked as different as possible while still sharing the common elements. And so I went in and removed a lot of the extra gear. And in the end, I had a fairly decent variety between all of the members of the team. That was still just the visuals for the martial law team. So I only gave us one puzzle piece this week. Although that might have been unfair, we did do a fair bit of work as well on the proactive reactions. Maybe I was being a little too hard only with one puzzle piece this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode of Sil Creates.